Welcome to the MS Dev Show, episode number 126. This week we talk with Trevor Sullivan about Image2Docker. All Teslas have self-driving hardware, but can they drive? And apparently the internet is unreliable because of DNS.
This episode of the MS Dev Show is brought to you by Infragistics, providing tools and solutions to accelerate design, development, insights, and collaboration for any organization.
This week we have Trevor Sullivan, business owner, software consultant, and trainer. How's it going, Trevor?
Great. How are you, Jason?
Carl? I am good. I'm good. So, Carl, speaking of Carl,
Yep.
We're going to have a giant epic party. So tell everybody about that.
Yeah, so we spliced in some information on the last episode, and as of yet, nothing's changed. We are still inviting everybody who can make it to the Redmond area on November 5th from 6 to 10 p.m. It's going to be at the boardwalk that's adjacent to the Microsoft Commons, and we are just super excited to meet everybody who can show up. We've invited a ton of Microsoft people personally, so if you get bored with me and Jason, you can find more interesting people to talk to. And we're really excited to have Donna Sakar from the Windows Insider program and James Whitaker there as well.
And I think we'll have some other surprise celebrity Microsoft guests as well. We're going up the ladder to get those higher ups to attend as well. And internally at Microsoft, we have some emails going out to a few hundred people, really smart technical people that we want to show up as well, that are want to go there and have some fun conversations. So I'm super excited for this. This is gonna be a good time. So that's 6 o'clock. I don't know if you mentioned that, on November 5th. Parking will be interesting. Like there's actually like 5,000 parking spots there if you go underground at the Commons, and just ignore it if it says employee parking or whatever. Just park wherever. Because it's on a Saturday.
We'll be the only ones there.
Yeah, we'll be the only ones there. That's why we'll literally have like 5,000 parking spots available. So parking should be pretty good. You just got to find your way. Luckily, that restaurant is on the map. So we have all that. Just check the show notes, and we'll have a link to all the details there. Okay, who's our Infragistics Ultimate Winner of the Week?
This week, the winner is Mark Sebald. He reached out to us on Facebook. He wrote, admiring my huge MS Dev Show mug handed to me personally by Carl Schweitzer at the Milwaukee Code Camp last Saturday. And yes, I helped put on the Milwaukee Code Camp alongside Greg Levenhagen and a few other great people. And for some of the giveaways, I gave away some of our awesome MS Dev Show mugs.
Yeah.
And so in addition to winning the mug, you win an Infragistics Ultimate license. So if you would like to get mentioned on the show, just like Mark did, send an email to feedback@msdevshow.com or comment on Facebook, YouTube, or Stitcher. We really like those 5-star iTunes reviews.
Yeah, which is bigger, the license or the mug? Because this is like
basically the mug is bigger.
Yeah, it's like the size of a planet.
All right. So the last episode, we had talked a bit about how Google is going to be optimizing its search indexes for mobile.
Yep.
And we also had another piece of feedback I just wanted to bring up from Alan Underwood. He's the co-host of the Coding Blocks podcast. And he said, to him, it makes sense that Google mobile indexes are being updated more frequently than desktop, because when you're on a mobile device, it takes into consideration your location and the time. And there's a lot of things that are only really relevant for certain portions of the day, or they happen for a short period of time and then they fall off. So for him, it really makes sense that you're going to get more accurate information on mobile. Now that stuff's probably not going to contain stuff that we'd be interested, like documentation for Azure, for instance. But, if we're doing a search on hey, what are these Greek restaurants near me?
Yeah.
Those are going to, or, especially like food trucks or something like that. That's going to really fluctuate, like even by like tweets that those Twitter accounts for the food trucks would have.
Yeah.
So he brings up some really good points on why why they have a mobile index and why mobile index is more important to keep fresh.
Yeah, well, he's clearly like way smarter than us, because whenever we were thinking about it, it was more the way that the article made it sound. It was more like how the information was presented. It seemed like Google was going to be like holding back up-to-date information if you were on a desktop. And I think we sort of fixated on that. It's like, hey, that just seems like a jerk move. But Alan, he thought about it from the other side, which is that it's simply a matter of them indexing it. The presentation of the information actually doesn't change at all. Like it just happens to be that the information is more up to date. So thank you, Alan, for opening our eyes there and actually explaining that the right way. So I wish you would have been on that episode for the news section. Okay, so should we get to the news?
Absolutely.
Okay, so our first news item is gone because of our second news item. So let's explain. DNS really does run the internet. So like half the internet is down right now.
Yeah, and for this is a news item because for us we're experiencing it right now. Apparently, Dyn DNS is having a DNS outage, and we were having a little bit of discussion before the show. We were talking about like how DNS has a time to live, so these entries are going to expire, and if they're not the canonical source, they're going to look recursively up the chain to what it should be. And if it can't find it, it's going to run out, and we're not going to have these addresses.
Yeah. Did you have any comment on this, Trevor?
Well, GitHub in particular and Slack and Twitter are all resources I use on a daily basis. And so I basically can't communicate with my customer right now because because Slack is down.
Ouch.
So,
yeah. I was thinking whenever this first went down, I'm like, man, I wish that like we would cache things longer. But actually a couple years ago, everybody bumped down their TTL. Like the TTL of DNS in general on the internet went down. It used to be, I guess we're probably all old enough to remember this. There was a time when you'd update your DNS settings, and then you'd have to wait a day to see if it took effect. And if you screwed up by publishing like incorrect DNS information, you were just toast for an entire day. And now like I sit there, I make a DNS change, I keep like hitting refresh because it generally takes like a few minutes, an hour at most. Like nobody really caches for longer than an hour. So the question is like, should we bump up some of these TTL values? That's kind of what I'm curious to hear. And then also, should we do more local DNS caching? Like it's crazy. I mean, it's annoying whenever your computer does it and it's incorrect. But man, it sure would be nice if locally, if your router was doing some more caching where it said, hey, I can't resolve this. So, maybe for the next 3 days or something, I'm going to give you the thing that I last had. And, if it's still there, if the IP is still there, then you'll be able to access it. And then
to me, that makes it like a really good developer mode feature, because Windows now in Windows 10, they have all like those developer features. Yeah. They should have, one of those things like, hey, it's down now, but the last time it was this. Do you want me to try that one? So one, it's a developer mode that you have to turn on. Yeah. And then two, it would have some sort of pop-up.
Oh man, Google! You think Google would be all over that? You think that Chrome, would pop up with that, and they would just hit their database. Of course, their database could be down, but that's a different issue. Yeah, a few years ago, I actually ran like a local DNS server that I pointed everything at, and then it would just forward to these other places, and I was actually using it as a DNS cache. But then it was like, okay, this is just this is a huge pain and low value. But I don't know. I guess I'm reevaluating now that all this stuff is down.
You only really need it maybe once every 2 or 3 years when these types of DDoS attacks happen.
Yeah, it just seems to show like a weakness in our DNS system though. Like one, I don't know. I guess it's not like some little attack or anything, but just I don't know. It just really shows like a really big weak point, and there's got to be a great technical fix. I mean, Had I just written down the IP address for some of these, like I could just put it in my host file and fix them. So I don't know. It seems like technically easy maybe not easy, but technically possible to solve this whole problem.
I think DNS is one of those services it hasn't really gone through any fundamental changes just because it's so simple and it's so straightforward and easy to use. But yeah, I mean, all these other applications have gone kind of more distributed, whereas DNS is still a rather centralized service. So it'd be cool if we had like a Tor BitTorrent for DNS, where everybody's DNS would kind of update from other people's DNS, and you could kind of have like a local cache that way or something.
Yeah, I mean the only downside of all this caching we're talking about is this whole works on my box syndrome, right? You'd be like, hey, this is working on mine. You know, I have to do the DNS. It's working on mine, but here nobody else can actually see it. But that's where you need, good ping tests and things like that to make sure all that stuff is working. What's kind of interesting is if my dynamic DNS goes down, or if my server that's hosting like all my security stuff, if it goes down, that's all monitored externally from different data centers, and I get notified. So yeah, that's really the solution to that whole problem. Okay, let's talk monkeys. Netflix Chaos Monkey upgraded, but lost a lot of features, which is interesting. Carl, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, Netflix came out with the Chaos Monkey, and what this did initially is it would randomly do all sorts of nasty stuff to the different pieces of the infrastructure. So it could, turn off a specific service or an instance, or it would burn through CPU cycles, or it would start just thrashing the disk. So all sorts of just crazy things would happen, causing chaos. And the reason why they had done this is they have a micro service architecture, and what they wanted to prove is if things happen within their architecture, other pieces, either through automation or through how it's set up, could handle the loss of individual pieces without having widespread failure anywhere in their system.
Yeah,
and
I did this at my last job. I mean, I managed the IT team, and they were afraid of certain things. They were, they like the UPS, right? The battery backup system. And then also, so their claim that they always told me was, hey, if we lose power, all the servers will realize it and they'll gracefully shut down. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to do that. And they're like, whoa, no. Like that's going to screw up stuff. I'm like, well, hang on a second. Like I thought it was, this great system. Oh yeah, it totally is. Okay. Well, then we're going to do it. And what we ended up doing was we made the unusual usual, right? And that's the idea here is like you want all these unusual events to be just standard operating procedure, and then you're not afraid of them and your software will handle them. So they run this in production, which is that's the part that just, kind of blows my mind, is they are actively messing with production instances here. So I don't know if you saw this in their car. They basically, they removed a whole bunch of features that you were talking about, like the CPU usage and everything. So that's all in a different program called FIT, which stands for something, failure injection testing. And there's a different post on that's linked in the comments. So they basically just moved all that functionality out. We should actually have an episode on this. I actually have a good person to talk about this. But yeah, they inject failures into different services. Like, let's just make this CPU spike on this one machine. It won't go down, but we want to make sure that, none of our code can actually run properly on it, so that we know that we can deal with it fine.
Well, that almost seems like they're taking the lessons, of how they've architected their services and are doing that with the Chaos Monkey itself. They're spreading it out across, multiple different things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they both are checking like different things. So it's very cool stuff. And like I said, we could have an entire episode on it. So, and I already know the person that I want to have.
I'll reach out to them.
I will. Okay, so let's talk Tesla.
So this was an amazing video that came out the other day. Tesla announced that all of their cars going forward are going to have all of the hardware necessary to support full level 5 self-driving, which level 5 means no human interaction needed. It can drive better than a person. And they showed a video of a person essentially driving into work, and the person always had their hands like just hovering behind the wheel. But it dropped them off, and then not only that, but then it like drove out of the parking lot as the parking lot was full, and they went off to another one.
Well, that's the part that I hadn't realized until recently, is that like Teslas can open and close their doors automatically as well. So they've already had this feature where you just walk up to it and it opens the door for you, and then you get in and it closes it for you. Like, you don't touch anything. And that's after the thing unparked itself and like came over to you. Which is a pretty cool feature. So this video, nice sunny day with, medium level traffic. What happens when there's a foot of snow? And, like on my commute, if I go during rush hour, what ends up happening is like I get out of these express lanes on the left, and I have 0.5 miles where I have to cross, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess 4 or 5 lanes, depending on how you look at it, of traffic. And there is literally no place for me to get in. Like I have to, turn on the turn signal and then wait and see if I found somebody nice to let me in. If not, then I have to move up to the next person. What does this car do in that situation? I'm guessing it's just they haven't programmed it to handle that, which is kind of like the other conversation we had where, just how does the code handle situations that haven't been specifically developed in? Is it going to do the right thing? Like, is it just going to sit there like forever on the middle of the highway, stopped with the right turn signal on until somebody lets it in? I'm guessing they haven't, addressed that at all yet, to be honest with you.
Either that or they have.
Yeah. I just came across this really interesting point about the whole Tesla self-driving thing.
Yeah.
A headline that says Tesla says customers can't use its self-driving cars for Uber, which is really interesting because you could basically, as an enterprising individual, you could be like, hey, I'm going to go purchase a fleet of 20 Teslas, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna sign up for Uber 20 times under incremental email account numbers, and then
well, so
send them out.
The funny thing is, so their ultimate goal is to use these for Uber, right? So they want you. The idea is that you buy the car, and then whenever you are not using it, you can basically add it to the Uber fleet if you want to. And that'll be interesting. Yeah, one gripe that I have, and I don't know if I mentioned on the show before, I always hear this argument like that cars are underutilized, and that this solves that whole issue. Like we would, you don't need to own a car if you don't drive much. But I don't quite understand that logic, because are we really throwing away cars that are not fully utilized? Like, do you ever take like a 2010 Honda Accord with 50,000 miles and just junk it? No, right? No. Like every car ends up, somebody always buys it.
They would just get utilized faster. So yeah, essentially, like if that were happen, we'd always have newer vehicles on.
Yeah.
Because they would wear out faster because we'd be running them 20 hours a day instead of 2.
Exactly. So I agree with that. But people make it sound like, our vehicles are not utilized. But the reality is we're at like 99% utilization. I'm sure people have that 2010 Accord and just park it forever, but that's the exception.
The other point about that is that like high utilization is not necessarily an end goal, right? Mm-hmm. So it sounds cool, right? It's like, oh, we're being more efficient with our resources kind of as a society. But to be quite honest, I probably wouldn't want to rent out my car because who knows what other people are doing in your vehicle. But I'd rather just have my own vehicle and utilize it at 5 or 10% rather than having 90% utilization and having it be trashed.
Exactly.
Ownership.
Yeah, so give you kind of a oddball example. I mean, I at my last house, I bought a diesel tractor. I used it for 4 years, and I sold it for basically $1,000 less than what I paid for it. And the thing sat around most of the time. I was at less than 1% utilization of that equipment. People normally, like, cities buy these things, and use them like 12 hours a day for the entire year, right? And I used it to mow my lawn every week for an hour. It was like a totally more than what I needed. But the reality was, like, I sold it with, I don't know what it had on it, 150 hours or something. Like clearly way underutilized, but it didn't matter because the next owner is going to use it, and that tractor is going to be around for the next 50 years being used until it's done. But you made a good point, Carl, which is that, then we can have newer vehicles on the road, which are more fuel efficient and whatever, so we can get by with less vehicles simultaneously, essentially. Yeah. So there's a little bit of advantage, but I think it's overrated.
Yeah. So I think that the other key thing that's interesting about this article is because we're putting in all of this hardware now, Tesla can turn it on and start collecting way more data in order to improve its self-driving system before they even turn it on in our vehicles.
Right. So that's the key. People are not understanding this. They're watching the video and they're looking at the headline. They're skimming the headline, and what they're not realizing is all it's saying is that the hardware's there. They're not saying like, hey, when you get this car, this is how you will use it. That is not what they're saying at all. And in fact, I I hate, or maybe I really love, I don't know. I hate being so negative But do you guys have like the camera on the back of your vehicle for whenever you back up?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had that thing in like in Wisconsin in in the snow and salt? What ends up happening? It's such a useful tool, and then you end up putting the vehicle in reverse, and you can't see a thing. Again, this Tesla, like every sensor is going to be like completely covered up, and I think the bigger advantage in the short term is just getting more information to the driver and providing them with more alerts like, hey, I think you're about to do something stupid, or maybe the car knows you're about to do something stupid and saving them. And I think for the next, I'll say 10 years, that's going to be the big advantage. We actually we bought a new van, and it actually has a camera on the right mirror. And what's really cool is whenever I turn on the turn signal to turn right, it actually shows me the entire right side of the vehicle. And I can see if there's somebody in a blind spot, and it shows lines on there. So I actually know, exactly where the van, like if I have to pull into to a small spot in the lane to the right of me, like I can see exactly if the vehicle will fit and pull right over and tell exactly what's going on. So that's what I'm looking forward to is the shock waves from this, all that extra information and vehicle intelligence. And then in 15, 20 years, actually having my car drive around for me and basically have a living room in my car instead of the current layout.
Another thing that I'm waiting for is for this type of automation and this type of sensor data to start making it into our homes. I mean, there's even, there's hooks into the Amazon Alexa that allow you to, unlock your door remotely or change your temperature remotely or, things like that. So you don't necessarily have to give somebody a key to your house. You can just unlock the door for them once and let them in to, take care of the dog or cat or something. And then they can leave and they don't have access to the house anymore,
Yeah, absolutely. The more data we can throw at the automation problems, the better. Having that data is key for that logic. Any other news, Carl?
I think we're good for this week.
Okay, let's talk to Trevor. Okay. Hello, Captain, Doctor, Docker, Captain. What is
not
that?
Not a doctor.
Not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I'm a Docker Captain.
You don't want me making health recommendations.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny. I had somebody on my it was Jason Short. We've had him on the podcast before. And what ends up happening if you have a PhD? He was on a flight one time, and they're like, we need your help for this medical situation. He's like, I'm not that kind of doctor.
Right. Not an MD.
Yeah. So you're a Docker Captain. So what is that?
Well, I keep a ship parked out in front of our apartment, and I periodically go out and captain that. No, I'm just kidding. I actually just play Assassin's Creed, and I pretend I'm a ship captain. I don't know if you've played Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but it's pretty awesome.
Okay.
You get to drive a ship around and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of a gamer part-time. But anyways, Docker Captain is kind of just a Microsoft MVP type of award that allows people who are kind of more community leaders, people who really enjoy talking about technology and evangelizing and talking about developer tooling and helping to improve the developer experience. It just really gives them more of a platform to help elevate their message and get reach more people and be part of a community of people who want to work on those types of efforts and together.
Okay, cool.
So what are the kinds of things that you've been using Docker for and that maybe we can think about using?
Well, I mean, the vast majority of my career up until this point for the past 12 and a half years has been Microsoft centric, but over the past 10 to 12 months, I've really been doing more in the Linux and Docker ecosystems. And one of the things, Docker is actually one of the things that I started looking at middle of last year, and I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, but I don't really do Linux stuff, and so I started kind of looking at it more and more. And when I really realized, what it's capable of doing, which is enabling, microservices to be easily deployed and rapidly scalable, that's when I really started to realize that this was a big deal, and I needed to invest a lot of time in that. So what's really interesting about the Docker ecosystem is that there's tons of startups. I mean, there's tons of startups I haven't even heard of yet that are just out there trying to build solutions that plug into Docker, extend Docker, that build on top of the core experience that they're providing and provide it richer capabilities. So yeah, it's really all about kind of microservices, although there are some other kind of more fringe use cases you could use it for too.
Okay, so in 1 year, you worked your way up through the ranks to get promoted up to captain, basically.
Not even really. I only started toying with Docker maybe in November of last year,
Oh, wow.
October 2015. And then I think it was either in February or March or maybe April,
Yeah.
where they issued that. They were just getting the program up off the ground.
Yeah.
So they were kind of looking for people who were, out there talking about Docker. And because I'm very active on social media, whether it's Twitter or my blog and what have you,
Yeah,
that's just how I got the word out.
Yeah, it's just exploded. So I have kind of two questions for you, because one, I was looking at your site, and I was actually reading some of the background information on Docker, and you brought up the point that I always make, and it's funny because I've even talked to people that understand Docker quite a bit, but like the fundamental description of what Docker is, people are like, oh, it's just like a container, like you just throw your stuff in it and then you can just run it anywhere. And like immediately when I first started looking at Docker, I'm like, that's not how this works at all. Like if you constrain yourself to like, one exact environment and the same patch level and that whole thing, like then you get that type of functionality. But you made such a good point on your site that I've always brought up is, if you write this thing in Linux, for example, if you want to bring it to Azure on Linux, that's fine. But if you want to bring it over to Windows or Windows Server, then it doesn't work the same way. Like they're just sort of incompatible containers at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the challenges that I have with marketing is, marketing is interesting because number one, it's your primary method of getting a message out to your potential customer base. And so anytime that you've got a large organization, I mean, Microsoft, for example, that, comes out with some new platform, some new feature on a platform, that they're always eager to get that message out and be like, hey, this is what we're working on.
Yeah, like any cost. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. At any cost. And what ends up happening is that these marketing departments get super eager. People get super pumped up. Engineers get super pumped up about getting their work out into the real world, which is great. But you got to kind of pull yourself back and be like, okay, how are enterprise customers actually going to use this, right? And how when I tell somebody, hey, you can create a container and run it anywhere, like you have to break out of this kind of scope of everywhere being Linux to, hey, people run Macs, people run Windows.
Yeah.
People don't always have access to Linux, or I mean, maybe they have access to it, but that's not their primary environment, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to just be realistic with people about what it actually does do. I mean, if there is a vision out there to eventually use, the Docker API on Windows, which we now have today with Server 2016, that's great, but point out the fact that there is a difference between Linux containers and Windows containers.
Yeah, and there's still advantages. We just got to remember, that the marketing message is not necessarily the technically correct message. And
right.
then, because my first realization was whenever I took, I think I was running on Ubuntu, and like I pulled out an image with like Fedora, and all of a sudden, like I went in and I said, oh, what version of Linux is this? And it's like, oh, this is Fedora. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's interesting. Same kernel, but it's all different binaries and everything.
Yep.
So I guess one sort of tangent question that I have is, the problem that I've always seen with this is, and not to like, sorry for going on a tangent, like diving into Docker, that wasn't my intention, but if you have a bug on your server, let's say you have a version of the kernel that's like one version behind, and you have the latest on your local dev box, and that bug affects something in your software, so you test it locally, like, oh, it's good, ship it, and you just like, I'm just going to move this container from point A to point B. Like, it's not going to work right in point B, right? I mean, like you're not like immune to that bug in the kernel, right?
As I understand it, no. I mean, you've got a single kernel instance on each host, and so therefore, yeah.
Now, in reality, that's a great point. In reality, it probably never happens. But I'm again trying to separate the marketing message from the technical there. So I know that Azure, So I know that Azure has some kind of container support, and then, like you said, Windows also has it. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, so this is where the marketing gets a little bit confusing again. So there's the Azure Container Service, which allows you to basically rapidly provision a Docker Swarm clustered environment on Azure. And it helps to kind of avoid the need to manually set up all of the infrastructure VMs and manually create the Docker Swarm cluster, which actually isn't very hard at all, even if you were to do that from scratch. So there's the Azure Container Service. It basically just automates the spin up of the infrastructure VMs for you and the Docker Swarm cluster itself. Then there's the Windows containers, which are actually just containers. So there's HyperV containers, which actually have their own kernel, unlike the Linux containers. Mm-hmm. And then there's Windows containers, which are, I like to think of it as Windows application containers, even though they're not referred to formally as that. And the Windows containers are essentially the process-driven containerization that's equivalent to the Linux Docker containers. One point of clarification for people on the Windows platform, though, is that if you do want to get started, and I just talked about this at IT Dev Connections last week in Las Vegas, is if you want to get started, you're brand new to Docker and you're on Windows, the easiest way to do that is just to get Docker for Windows. And so what that does is it basically spins up a Hyper-V virtual machine for you that's running a very small, lightweight Linux distribution. And it creates that VM for you, and it manages it, right? So you can't actually access the console of that VM. Everything that you do is just from Docker commands that you issue from a PowerShell session.
Okay, very cool. I'm still waiting for the Linux subsystem for Windows. Like, I don't know what the status is, but like I really want that to be able to do Docker, because then I don't know. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'm guessing I don't need a lot of the stuff that comes in Docker for Windows. I know there's like other good graphical tools and stuff like that, but it would be awesome just to be able to run that stuff natively. And that would be something like I first tried to do Docker on my Mac. And, you know, it's funny because it's like Unix and it's like, oh, well, Docker will just run on here. And then it pulls down, you know, like VirtualBox and installs, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like it's having a Mac doesn't get, even though it's like the same like bash interface, like it doesn't get you any closer to be able to do any of the stuff. So I actually wonder if Windows is going to be the far better place to do stuff. I think Linux is probably like the best, right? Because there's no parity difference then there at all, right? I'm guessing, you know, I've heard of people running just like an Ubuntu desktop just so they could do Docker stuff, you know, on their machine.
I'm actually pretty impressed with the experience using Docker for Windows. Okay. So predating Docker for Windows and Docker for Mac, which are more or less equivalent products, they had something called the Docker Toolbox, and the Docker Toolbox does include something called Kitematic, which is that graphical tool you were referring to earlier, and that allows you to basically just spin up a container on that VirtualBox VM, you know, automatically from a nicer graphical interface. But it's not really good for production usage. You're not really going to do any serious work with it. I haven't really seen any major developments with Kitematic, but I also haven't really been keeping up with it either. So just, you know, tread carefully when it comes to Kitematic. But what's interesting about Docker for Mac and Docker for Windows, though, is that they're actually the intent of those products was to spin up a VM automatically using the native hypervisor. So rather than having to install VirtualBox on Mac, it uses what's called xHyve, which is basically a hook into the native hypervisor for Mac, and same thing on Windows. It uses HyperV. Oh,
so on the Mac they've gotten rid of the VirtualBox requirement?
Yeah, so Docker for Mac only uses the xHyve interface, the libraries.
I didn't know that. I'll have to check that out again. But honestly, now I'm going to do it on Windows, so it doesn't matter anyway. Now that we get the Windows support.
Infragistics Ultimate UX and UI tools and enterprise mobility solutions, SharePlus and ReportPlus, enable high-performance apps on any device, faster data insights, simplified collaboration, and market-leading security, all backed by comprehensive support. With Infragistics Ultimate UX and UI Development Toolkit, you can ensure mission-critical applications delivering a superior user experience on the desktop, web, and native device environments for iOS and Android. With the latest BI tools, wow your users with dashboards providing the data insights that they need when and where they need it, all at a low total cost of ownership. Try it today. Download a free trial at Infragistics.com and follow them for the latest updates in UX and UI development, reporting, and collaboration at Infragistics on Twitter. And remember, each week, if we pick your comment on the show, you will get a free copy of Infragistics Ultimate UX and UI Toolset.
So You had worked on something called Image2Docker. So what is that, and what's it useful for?
Yeah, so Docker approached me a couple of months back before Microsoft Ignite, which just happened in late September. And they wanted to have some kind of tool that was open source, community driven, that helped people to kind of migrate applications from running on native Windows VMs to running inside of Docker containers. And so Docker containers are, I should say, Windows containers are still kind of in the evolving phase. I think technically it GA'd last week, but there's still being a story built around that and everything, and how exactly they're going to work. Like, how do I run IIS inside of a container? How do I run SQL Server inside of a container? Those are things that just haven't been fully baked yet. But the idea that Docker had was to basically provide a tool that could take a offline Windows image, like a VHD file or a WIM file, and actually inspect the contents of that to find various types of artifacts. And an artifact is basically just a generic representation for some application that's running inside that VM. So, for example, if somebody set up IIS with a WSGI handler for Python or Ruby or something that they're running inside of IIS through a WSGI interface, we would be able to basically search for those components on the system and then basically build a Windows container automatically, or build a Docker file for a Windows container automatically based on those artifact inspections. Same thing if you're running like a Redis cache inside of a Windows VM, or maybe Apache, right? We would basically be able to search for those inside the image and then build a Docker file based on whatever the results of the scan were.
So it doesn't convert the image to a Docker-ready container, but what it does is it allows a Docker container to be automated with all of the dependencies that my application is going to need.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, so the inputs to it are basically a WIM file or a VHDX file. And then the tool itself will actually mount the image, run the desired inspections called artifacts, and then it'll spit out a Docker file, at which point you can issue a Docker build command using the traditional Docker command line or the Docker PowerShell module that Microsoft is developing.
Okay, and you wrote this in PowerShell then?
Yeah, Image2Docker is a PowerShell project. Okay. It's on github.com/docker/image2docker.
Okay, and how come you wrote it in PowerShell?
So originally, Docker wanted a more generic tool that would scan Linux images as well as Windows images, okay. But they had a kind of tight timeline to launch for Ignite. They wanted to have something ready to go for Microsoft Ignite in late September. So given the other workload that I currently had going on, I really did not have a lot of time to dedicate to it at all. And I've also been doing PowerShell for more than 10 years, and so I have experience. I can whip up PowerShell code fairly quickly, and so I was able to get a prototype developed in that short time span.
Okay.
So you mentioned that, like through the process of this, it uses different inspectors to, look through the image. What are you actually looking for? Are you looking for like certain folders and certain try to pull out certain versions, or is this something that could do it a little bit more generically?
It's actually very generic, and it was designed to be modular in such a way that other people could contribute their own artifacts to it, or just end users of it could develop their own artifacts. Like, hey, I want to scan for Apache .exe under the C Apache folder on these 200 images that are sitting in this repository over here. So it was really just given the short timeline, it was really designed more of as a framework for other people to add their own extensions onto. A couple of the extensions that were the artifacts that we provided out of the box, though, were scanning for Apache. So it'll basically just mount the image, go under the C Apache folder, the root/Apache folder, and look for an httpd.exe, which is the Apache executable. If it finds that, what happens is the artifact creates a manifest file, which is just a JSON manifest file, and then during the generation phase, which comes after the discovery phase, each artifact has its own separate program that inspects the manifest file and actually generates the Docker file output for that particular artifact.
I got
so
you.
I could use kind of that manifest file as kind of like a state of what's kind of in that image as well. So, for example,
Yep.
like I could use it almost for troubleshooting. If I have an image that's working and an image that isn't, and they're supposed to be the same, kind of use it to find the differences between the two as well.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another use case for it for sure.
And then you said I can plug in new, I don't know if you call those artifacts, or I can
Yep.
plug in a new scanner, for example, that
Yep.
goes and looks for my application. Okay, that's very cool.
Yeah, so if you can, I mean, again, this was the intent of the project, was to build more of a framework for other people to build on top of. And so there are contributing directions on the project. So basically, I would pull it up if we didn't have this DNS problem, but but basically, I might have it locally, but that'll take me too long.
Yeah.
In any case, you have to write a discovery script that scans the image and basically generates this manifest that'll get written to a temporary directory. And then separately, you have to write, I forget exactly what the name of it is, but there's basically a file that generates the output for the Docker file, and based upon the results of the manifest. So there's kind of the scanning phase or the discovery phase, and then the generation phase, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense that you split it apart so you can sort of run one phase, and then, like
Yep.
Carl was saying, he might want to look at that file then, that intermediate file.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The JSON files get persisted behind the scene or behind after the task is done running. So you can certainly go in there and grab those if you want to.
Okay. So your blog, like I was out there looking at this earlier this morning, and I love this. I'm definitely gonna bookmark this, because you have out there, you sort of have some things mixed in here. But I was looking at the menus, and like, man, you have like sort of these high level topics like Microsoft and training and conferences and things like that. But once I actually dove in, like I went under Microsoft, I went under Azure, and I went Microsoft Azure Resource Manager, and I was surprised because I thought it was going to take me somewhere else or have like some links, but you have, I don't know what this is when it's printed, but this is like a comprehensive explanation of how all this stuff works. Like, this is just amazing. You have a table of contents, and it just walks through the whole thing in like a super simple manner. You have the same thing with Docker, and I think you have more in here. It's just I haven't explored everything yet. So I love this whole format, because blog posts are nice, for like describing like one thing. But I like this idea too. Like, you have, you can sort of direct people to this one stop shop for like, here's how to get up to speed pretty quickly on this particular technology, and here's all the aspects. And I'm guessing you learned a lot out of this too. So I guess it's not really a question other than, I'm kind of curious, like, what made you decide to build it this way, and what was your motivation here? Because this is great.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. I'm glad that you were even able to find that, because it is kind of buried in the menus.
It is,
and
yeah.
The resource manager and the Docker documentation are my two main pages. I have plans to do more.
It's funny because those are like what I gravitated towards. So I guess I just lucked out. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely did luck out. I mean, I have some kind of odd ones like PlayStation 4 screenshots of a couple of games like Fallout 4, but but the main reason that I really built this Docker documentation and the Azure Resource Manager documentation is because, well, two different reasons, right? So with Azure Resource Manager, which is the first one you mentioned, it was really because Azure Resource Manager's documentation coming from Microsoft wasn't really getting updated to my level of expectation. In my opinion, it was not very consumable by the vast majority of Azure customers out there. So, rather than kind of doing free work for Microsoft, so to speak, I decided that I would basically document it myself, document it in my own format, the way that I chose. I didn't have to get any pre-approval to structure things in a particular way. And so my website is basically under my control to share information in a way that I feel is relevant to other people and how they should go about learning it. So, I mean, if people disagree with my format, that's perfectly fine. If people benefit from it, that's great. So far, I've gotten pretty good feedback about it, including just from you now. So I appreciate that. But, you can't satisfy everybody. And some people are going to learn better with my format. Some people are going to learn better with other formats out there. And it's basically just another resource to help push people forward with ARM.
Okay. You even have like PowerShell feedback out here. This is cool. I like this because it's like everything Trevor. I can go to one place, and it's just kind of cool how you have it organized out here.
Actually, one other page I have that I started putting together, if you go to Microsoft and then Windows 10 tips and tricks, I started putting some tips and tricks out there too, just like simple stuff.
Oh, so Carl, do you think he has the graphics one here?
He probably does not.
Okay. So what was the key combination for that again, Carl?
The Windows key, Shift, Control B.
Yeah. So Trevor, don't hit that now.
I just did.
Okay.
It didn't do anything.
No,
actually, if you looked, your monitor would have flashed,
right?
because it reset the graphics stack.
Okay. Did you say Control?
I believe so. It's on our show notes, which
it's
is
Windows key, Control Shift B.
Okay, I didn't hit Control, so I'm gonna avoid doing that for now. Since
it resets the graphics stack.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I haven't had
Wow.
that. I
How did
haven't
you
had
find
that
that?
actually fix an issue yet. Yeah, where did you find that, Carl? Were you looking through
found
the
that on
Windows
Twitter.
source? Oh, okay.
You
Carl
didn't
wrote
find
that
it
for
on
me.
TrevorSullivan.net?
No, not yet, but now you can add that one in there. And then I was just looking at what you enable HyperV. Yeah, that's cool. And it I kind of suspected too, one of the reasons you've written a lot of this stuff is for your own reference.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I see like, enable Hyper-V on Windows 10, and you have like the PowerShell like right here. So I'm like, I bet you he just goes back there whenever he needs it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. As I was writing this article last night, and I haven't written any articles in a couple of months at least, but I was writing this article last night on kind of a more advanced PowerShell WMI topic that I haven't really touched on much lately. And as I was doing research for it, I actually came across an article that I'd written about 2 years ago for the Scripting Guys blog. And so that's referenced in there.
Okay. Yeah. The other thing that you should do is, and for the Windows 10 section, is add the God mode folder. If you're familiar with that. I
enabled it one time a while ago, but
yeah, it's one of those things I can never remember to use. I had it turned on forever, and I would just never remember to actually go in there. So.
Yeah, so I have this weird thing where I try to do things natively. Like I'm not a huge like customizer, and I'm kind of changing that a little bit, where I'll start kind of taking internal mental dependencies upon tools that aren't provided out of the box. But up until this point, one of the things that I've really tried to do is focus on the core experience, so that anytime, because what I see a lot of people do in the IT industry, developers, engineers, anybody, is that they make these assumptions in conversations, and they presume that you have this tool pre-installed, or they presume that it's configured in a particular way, and you simply can't always make those assumptions based off of how different people configure their environments. And so I've always kind of prided myself on understanding at a very intimate level the core experience on Windows, or the core experience in PowerShell. Like I wouldn't use a profile script to kind of set up my environment. I would just use a raw environment every single time that I fire up PowerShell, right? And that helps to reinforce a lot of concepts, but it also does, on the flip side, kind of prohibit certain innovation.
Okay, cool. I like it.
And then on the Docker side of things, the reason I really wrote the Docker documentation page is because I was literally trying to learn Docker a year ago.
Yeah.
I had no idea what software containers are. I had no idea what kernel namespaces or C groups were. And so I was just coming through here trying to document to the best of my ability, what you can do with Docker and how it works and what the different components of it are. Things like the Docker Hub, which is a repository for Docker container images. And you've got Docker Machine versus Docker Compose versus Docker itself. And so it's really important for people to kind of understand all these concepts when they're brand new to the ecosystem.
Yeah, and a great way to learn is to document it like that. So.
And I'm sure, I've gone back and actually made some small edits to this just based on my better understanding, my more recent understanding of things.
Yeah.
I didn't word things quite the right way, but you got to try and just iterate.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to mention?
Pertaining to containers, Docker, anything?
Yeah, containers, PowerShell, anything else we mentioned? I think there's lots of good information locked up in your head, but is there anything that you're dying to get out there that we glazed over or forgot to mention?
There's a new version of Vim. I'm not a heavy Vim user, but I'm learning more and more about it every day, and it's actually pretty darn cool.
Okay.
So
that's something I just have not gotten into yet. So I should.
What's interesting? You should try Vim. And look, the learning curve is steep. Don't let these experienced people trick you. They say,
I actually
hey,
used
it's really
it in
easy
college.
to use.
Yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, I used it in college, and I've used it, like one time each year since then. But yeah, that's about it.
I mean, I was literally watching this YouTube video like yesterday or the day before, like on some Vim tips and tricks, and the guy was saying that that Vim, that you didn't have to conform to Vim conformed to you as a human.
Okay.
And I fundamentally disagree with that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But it is still powerful. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just that you do have to learn the tool. It's not like the tool just naturally works. Like PowerShell, on the other hand, naturally comes to you. Like PowerShell just makes sense as a human, right?
Yeah.
And it was designed to be that way, and I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Carl, what do you got for the dev tip of the week?
So I know a lot of developers use Slack, and especially if you belong to Slacks that have a lot of people on, one of the things that you might not realize is how many different channels are getting added because you're not being invited to all the new ones. So one thing that I find really useful when using Slack is just creating a channel that people can announce what channels they're creating.
How do I know when you create that one, though?
So you'll get a notification, or you put it in general or something for, to invite everybody over to that one.
Make sure you say at everyone.
People love that. Never use that.
People
disable that.
Yeah.
But this has come up recently on a few of the Slack channels I've been a part of, and the ones where we've added this, we've called it like channels channel. It's actually been really good. One of the things that I anticipated is just people to announce things and to get old or whatever. But, a few people have been really creative and been like, hey, I'm a member of, these three right here that are really useful to me, and I would like more people joining in the discussion. And that's actually something that's been really cool. Just, seeing, people inviting other people in for discussions, not just a, blind, like here's this channel thing.
Okay, cool. Okay, Trevor, I need you to pick a number between 1 and 4 inclusive.
Geez, I didn't know I was going to be put on the spot. How about 4?
Yeah, like that's the easy part. Okay, here we go. 4.
4 is the number of beers that I currently want.
Only?
Okay. Would you rather have 4 beers? No, just kidding. Would you rather have clumps of hair growing on your tongue or have clumps of hair growing on the outside of your nose and ears?
Ugh. Are you asking me?
Yeah. You pick 4. I didn't.
Okay, well, considering that I like to enjoy my beer, definitely not the tongue. So I guess clumps of hair on my nose and what? Ears?
Yeah, which is really not much different than reality for many of us.
Yeah, I think I have some there.
Yeah. Okay, Carl, pick a number.
I'll take number 1.
Number 1. I think this one is going to make you think. Would you rather have 14 fingers or 16 toes?
Huh.
And I want to know if this one's retroactive. So do I
like
get
going
them
back in time?
Yeah, because like I've already learned how to type, right? So like adding 4 more like how many fingers do I have? Adding 4 more fingers would be I don't know. Like if I had it from the beginning, then I could have learned to have typed with them and been like super efficient. Because I'd actually have some fingers for the symbols.
Yeah, if it's going forward, I would probably go with toes just for that scenario, because your hands are so dexterous and you're used to all the capabilities that you can. Adding new ones would definitely throw you off.
Yeah, but if it's retroactive, then you take the 14.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's
because at this point, all I would need for is new shoes for my feet if it was toes.
Yeah. So I will send a message to You Gotta Be Kidding and get some clarification on that so we can discuss. I will get on that. Okay, Trevor, where can people find you?
You can find me a lot of places.
Just look
Twitter,
out your window right now.
Yeah, that's scary. PC Geek 86 on Twitter, TrevorSullivan.net. My business site is artofshell.com.
Yeah.
Twitter's Art of Shell for that as well.
Okay.
There's also a online video streaming page at learn.artofshell.com.
Okay.
So you can go there, and for $12 a month or $120 a year, I think, $10 a month, You can get some video training on Docker, PowerShell, Azure, that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
So yeah,
okay.
And always reach out to me anytime.
Okay, so can I ask where the PC Geek 86 came from? Is the 86 in reference to the 8086 architecture or something else?
Actually, no, that's the year I was born.
Okay, I was wondering if that was my second guess.
Yeah,
okay.
I've held that alias for quite a long time, and it just hasn't really benefited me to change it. So
okay, that sounds good. Okay, Carl, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Carl Schweitzer when it's not having a DNS issue.
yeah. Right now, you can find me nowhere.
Yeah.
You can find me at ytechie.com or on Twitter at twitter.com/ytechie. So, Trevor, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about a number of topics, including Docker and Image2Docker. It's very cool stuff.
Thank you for having me. Good to talk to you guys.